Apple is under investigation in France for allegedly slowing down their phones to force consumers to upgrade. The company has admitted it deliberately slows down older phones, but it says it does this to preserve battery performance. Critics claim this is all just a ploy to force us to buy newer models. Well, joining us to talk about slowdowns is John Poole, founder of the Toronto-based software development company Primate Labs. Now, you guys have actually taken the phones apart, studied them as they aged. First of all, how did you even get into that? Why did you start to study those? Was it just that there were all these rumors around that this was in fact happening?
So what actually happened was we didn't actually take the phones apart. It's our software that analyzes the phone.
Metaphorically took them apart, I mean.
Fair enough. What happened was back around September with the launch of iOS 11, we started getting a lot of customer complaints saying, you know, my phone's slow, what's going on? And normally we'll see a little bit of that around an iPhone launch simply because people have upgraded their phone. Maybe the software is doing a little bit more in the background. It makes the phone feel slow. But what was different this year was that our benchmark, Geekbench, the numbers it was producing actually backed up this claim of, oh, my phone feels slow.
Right.
And we thought at first, well, there could be a bunch of different reasons about this. We weren't sure. We figured it would die down as, you know, everyone had upgraded and the phone sort of settled down. And it didn't. It just kept happening. So around November, we started sort of poking around at this and trying to investigate it. And it wasn't until we saw the Reddit post that came out in December saying, you know, someone said their phone was slow, they upgraded the battery, and then all of a sudden their phone was fast again. Sort of the light bulb went off above my head, and I thought, this is maybe a hardware issue. This isn't a software issue. This is a hardware issue. So we started digging into the numbers that our benchmark provides, and we went through the results. I believe we had about 100,000 results that we could go through.
Wow.
And that's when we found there was an actual performance problem.
So actual data on a Reddit debate, that's hard to imagine. Is Apple the only one doing this, though?
Right now, I can't say definitively that this is only Apple, but we've looked at other manufacturers, Samsung, LG, we've looked at sort of the popular Android phones, and we haven't seen anything like this happening on those phones.
Right. Apple now has said that it does this, and it does it to preserve battery life. Right. Does that make sense? Like, does that actually stand up to argument? It makes a certain amount of sense. It's not just battery life. What was happening was on older, on say iPhone 6 and iPhone 6S, it was about 14, 16 months old. What would happen would be it could start shutting down randomly. So you'd be at 30% battery and your phone would just shut down. Right.
So what Apple did was they changed the way the phone behaves. When your processor runs at full speed, it uses a lot more power, requires more voltage. What they did is they capped the performance level of the processor so it wouldn't use as much power. It wouldn't put as much demand on the battery. So then your phone stopped shutting down abruptly, but at the cost of having a slightly slower, and in some cases, a much slower phone.
Much slower in a lot of cases, for sure. I mean, I've seen it on mine. Does the fact that there is a technological answer to that, does that negate this argument that there's this like sort of pre-planned obsolescence of these phones?
I don't think this is necessarily planned obsolescence. What I think this is that they had a problem with the phone, with the 6 and the 6S, where they were having these sudden shutdowns. And they made the decision that a slow phone is better than a phone that shuts down abruptly.
Right.
Everybody, people live on their cell phones now.
Right.
Use them to communicate, use them to navigate. If it suddenly shuts down, especially if you're out and about and you can't start it back up again until you get home and charge it, that's no good. So it's much better to have a phone that sort of slows down.
So where do things go from here? Because you have this France, I guess it's a lawsuit or whatever, the French government saying you're not allowed to do this. You got a lot of people that are really angry about this, data notwithstanding. Where do you see things going from here?
I think Apple's done some things that are really good that I sort of wish they'd done when they issued this change back last January, where they've said, come in, we'll replace the battery, we'll do it, for a much significantly discounted price. I believe it's $35 Canadian right now. I think that's great. What's going to be interesting, though, is that sort of as this France lawsuit and all the other class action lawsuits play out, is sort of the question of, well, why did this happen in the first place? Why were these phones suddenly shutting down? Is this something that Apple should have reasonably been able to say, this is what's happening, we know this is going to happen, we're going to have to work around it, or was this something that caught them by surprise?
Good stuff always. Thanks for this. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
John Poole, the founder of Primate Labs.